Chapter 1. The Underestimated Man. The harsh fluorescent lights of Quantum Dynamics' engineering department buzzed overhead as Preston Novak stared at the pink slip in his hand. After 12 years of loyal service as their lead research engineer, he was being let go due to corporate restructuring. The irony wasn't lost on him. Just 3 months ago, he'd submitted a revolutionary battery design that could potentially change the energy industry forever, but the company had dismissed it as too experimental. Preston ran his hand through his salt and pepper hair, packed his personal belongings into a cardboard box, and drove home in silence. The modest suburban house he shared with his wife Juliana looked exactly as it always did. Immaculate front lawn, curtains visible through spotless windows, and not a hint that it contained a marriage that had been cooling for years. "You're home early," Juliana remarked without looking up from her yoga pose in their living room. At 43, she maintained the toned physique of someone 10 years younger, an achievement she reminded Preston of frequently. "I got laid off," Preston said simply, setting down his box of belongings. Juliana's pose collapsed. She stood up, activewear hugging her frame, her blonde hair perfectly styled despite her workout. For a fleeting moment, Preston thought he saw concern in her eyes before it hardened into something else entirely. "Seriously? After all this time trying to move up, you get fired instead?" She shook her head, a bitter laugh escaping her lips. "I always knew you'd fail, Preston. You never had what it takes. Too much time spent on your little projects, not enough time playing the game." Preston absorbed the verbal blow silently. It wasn't the first time Juliana had belittled his career, but somehow this hit differently. Once upon a time, she'd been his biggest supporter. When had that changed? "I'll find something else," he said quietly, heading toward the basement door. "That's it? That's your plan?" Juliana called after him. "God, Preston, wake up. Do you know what this means for us? For our lifestyle?" Preston paused at the door. "I'm sure you'll manage, Jules. You always do." In his basement workshop, Preston locked the door behind him, a habit he'd developed over the past year as Juliana had grown increasingly dismissive of his tinkering. The space was meticulously organized with tools, components, and several computer monitors. He sat heavily in his chair and glanced at the innocuous-looking device in the corner, a prototype that Quantum Dynamics had rejected, but that Preston knew could revolutionize energy storage forever. His phone buzzed with a text from his only real friend, Darius Fleming, another engineer who'd been let go from Quantum 3 months earlier. "Heard the news. Those corporate vultures. Beer at O'Malley's tonight." Preston typed back, "Not tonight. Working on something big. Rain check." Setting down his phone, Preston pulled out a business card he'd been carrying for weeks. It belonged to Vivian Russell, a formidable patent attorney who specialized in disruptive technologies. He'd met her at an innovation conference last year and been impressed by her razor-sharp mind. As he dialed her number, Preston glanced at the framed photo on his desk. Him and Juliana on their wedding day 15 years ago, both smiling broadly. He barely recognized either of those people anymore. Outside the basement door, elderly Mrs. Florence Whitaker from next door was dropping off a casserole as she'd done every Friday for years. She overheard Juliana on the phone. "Complete disaster, Veronica. Preston lost his job today. I know, right? As if our social standing wasn't precarious enough. No, he's hiding in his workshop as usual. Listen, can we move dinner to 7 instead? Preston won't notice anyway." And Bradley confirmed he can make it. Mrs. Whitaker's eyes narrowed as she quietly set down the casserole and let herself out. Preston had always been kind to her, helping with home repairs and technology problems. Whatever was happening in that marriage, she had a feeling Preston deserved better. Chapter 2. Hidden Value. 3 weeks later, Preston sat across from Vivian Russell in her downtown office, watching as she reviewed the technical specifications and prototype testing results for his energy storage device. "This is remarkable, Preston," she said finally, setting down the documents and removing her glasses. "If these efficiency numbers are accurate, you're sitting on potentially the most significant energy storage breakthrough of the decade." "They're accurate," Preston confirmed. "I triple-checked everything before bringing it to you." Vivian leaned forward. "Then we need to discuss strategy. Your former employer has no claim to it, Preston interrupted. I developed this entirely on my own time, with my own resources. It's specifically excluded from my employment agreement, which covered only direct research assignments. Vivian smiled appreciatively. Good. That simplifies things. But it also means we need to move quickly. I have contacts at several companies that will be extremely interested in this technology. Over the next month, Preston conducted secret meetings with potential buyers while telling Juliana he was interviewing for new positions. Their relationship had deteriorated further, with Juliana spending more and more time away from home with her book club and charity events. One evening, returning early from a meeting with a promising Japanese tech conglomerate, Preston found an unfamiliar luxury SUV parked in his driveway. Through the living room window, he saw Juliana laughing intimately with a man he recognized immediately. Bradley Westmoreland, CEO of Rival Tech, one of Quantum Dynamics' main competitors. Preston ducked down and circled to the side of the house, his mind racing. He'd heard stories about Westmoreland, how he'd built his fortune by acquiring struggling companies, stripping their assets, and discarding the employees. 3 of Preston's former colleagues had lost everything after Westmoreland's hostile takeover of their startup. Through the kitchen window, Preston watched as Westmoreland pulled Juliana into a passionate embrace. The revelation of her infidelity hurt less than he expected. Their marriage had been a shell for years, but seeing her with Westmoreland specifically made his blood run cold. The next day, after Juliana left for her Pilates class, Preston made a call to Darius. I need everything you can find on Bradley Westmoreland, he said quietly. The vulture from Rival Tech? What? Darius asked. He's sleeping with Juliana. A long pause. Shit, Preston. I'm sorry, but also not surprised. There have been rumors. What rumors? That Westmoreland gets close to wives and girlfriends of engineers with promising projects. It's his technique. Corporate espionage with a personal touch. The pieces clicked into place. Juliana's sudden interest in his work 6 months ago. Her detailed questions about his little project before she dismissed it as worthless. The unexplained times when his workshop looked slightly disturbed. That evening, Preston installed hidden cameras in his workshop and throughout the house. 3 days later, while supposedly at a job interview, he watched remotely as Juliana led Westmoreland into their home and then into his workshop, where they rummaged through his papers. There's nothing useful here, Juliana complained. He keeps everything important on encrypted drives. Keep looking, Westmoreland insisted. Our sources say he's developed something groundbreaking. If Quantum was too stupid to recognize it, their loss is our gain. Preston had seen enough. He contacted Vivian Russell immediately and accelerated the patent sale negotiations. Within 2 weeks, they had finalized a deal. $67 million for exclusive rights to his energy storage technology, with substantial royalties on future implementations. The night after signing the deal, Juliana confronted him over dinner. You've been distant, Preston, always at these supposed interviews that never lead anywhere. Her tone was accusatory, but Preston detected the fishing for information. I'm doing my best, Jules, but as you so helpfully pointed out, I'm a failure. He pushed his plate away. Maybe you're right. Maybe you deserve more from life than a failure for a husband. Juliana's expression shifted to something calculating. Well, I've been thinking the same thing, actually. Have you? Preston said blandly, already knowing what was coming. I think we should separate, Preston. This isn't working anymore. We want different things. Different things, Preston repeated. Or different people? Juliana's eyes flashed with momentary alarm before she composed herself. This isn't about anyone else. It's about me needing more than this. She gestured vaguely around their modest home. Preston nodded slowly. If that's what you want, Juliana. You're not going to fight for our marriage? She asked, seemingly surprised by his calm acceptance. Would you want me to? She had no answer for that. Chapter 3. The Filing. She's going for blood, stated Harvey Blackwood bluntly, adjusting his wire-rimmed glasses as he reviewed the divorce filing. As Preston's newly retained attorney, the seasoned divorce lawyer had seen it all, but even he seemed impressed by the comprehensiveness of Juliana's demands. She wants the house, half of your 401k, alimony based on your previous salary at Quantum, and, this is interesting, all intellectual property related to your hobby projects, claiming she supported you during their development. Harvey looked up. She's being advised by someone who knows exactly what they're doing. Bradley Westmoreland, Preston said flatly. Harvey's eyebrows rose. The rival tech CEO? That's a complication. Complicate it further, Preston said, sliding a USB drive across the desk. This contains video evidence of them searching my workshop for technical information. Harvey let out a low whistle as he pocketed the drive. Corporate espionage angle. Nice leverage. He leaned forward. But there's something you're not telling me, isn't there? Your financial disclosures seem incomplete. Preston hesitated, then made a decision. What I'm about to tell you doesn't leave this room until legally required. I recently sold a patent for $67 million with ongoing royalties. Harvey's professional demeanor cracked momentarily, revealing genuine shock. And your wife doesn't know? The sale finalized after she started sleeping with Westmoreland and 3 days before she filed for divorce. The funds haven't been transferred yet. A slow smile spread across Harvey's face. Mr. Novak, I think we might be able to work with this. Over the next 3 weeks, Preston played the part of the defeated husband perfectly. He moved out of the master bedroom into the guest room, appeared appropriately devastated at mediation sessions, and offered minimal resistance to Juliana's demands. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, he worked with Harvey to ensure his patent money would be protected when the time came for mandatory financial disclosure. Juliana grew increasingly confident, even bringing Westmoreland to the house when she knew Preston would be home. "Preston, you remember Bradley," she said with poorly concealed satisfaction as Westmoreland stood in their living room, examining Preston's possessions like a vulture assessing carrion. "Of course," Preston replied mildly. "The man who built an empire by destroying others. Your reputation precedes you, Mr. Westmoreland." "Business is business, Novak," Westmoreland replied with a smirk. "Some people are predators, others are prey. Nothing personal." "I completely agree," Preston said, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "Nothing personal at all." The day before their court date, Veronica Hayes, Juliana's closest friend, unexpectedly appeared at Preston's temporary workshop in the garage. "I can't believe I'm doing this," she said nervously, glancing over her shoulder. "But you should know, Juliana and Bradley are planning to claim you're mentally unstable. They're going to say your obsession with your inventions makes you unfit to manage any assets. They've paid off your former supervisor at Quantum to testify that you were fired for erratic behavior, not laid off." Preston studied Veronica carefully. "Why are you telling me this?" Veronica looked uncomfortable. "Because I've watched Juliana change over the years. She used to talk about how brilliant you were, how proud she was of you. Then she met Bradley at that charity gala last year, and suddenly nothing you did was good enough." She shook her head. "I've seen Bradley's pattern before. He uses people and discards them. Juliana thinks she's special, but she's just another pawn," Preston finished. "Exactly. And regardless of your marriage problems, no one deserves what they're planning to do to you." After Veronica left, Preston called Harvey immediately. "They're escalating," he said, explaining Veronica's warning. "Time to activate our contingency plan." The next morning in the county courthouse, Preston sat quietly beside Harvey as Juliana and her attorney presented their case, painting Preston as an unsuccessful, unstable inventor whose hobby projects have financially drained their marriage. Juliana performed beautifully, dabbing at crocodile tears as she described Preston's obsessive behaviors and failure to provide. When it was Harvey's turn, he simply said, "Your Honor, we're prepared to agree to Mrs. Novak's terms, with one small modification. Mr. Novak will retain sole ownership of his intellectual property." Juliana's attorney scoffed. "Your Honor, those worthless inventions are exactly what caused financial strain on this marriage. If Mrs. Novak is taking on a debt they created, she deserves any potential value they might someday have." "Mr. Blackwood," the judge interjected, "is your client aware that by accepting these terms, he's essentially walking away with almost nothing after 15 years of marriage?" "He is, Your Honor," Harvey confirmed. However, before finalizing, we are legally required to submit updated financial disclosures. We have those prepared. Harvey handed documents to the clerk, who passed copies to the judge, Juliana's attorney, and Juliana herself. As they read, the courtroom fell into stunned silence. This can't be right, Juliana's attorney stammered, looking up from the papers. Mr. Novak, are you claiming you received $67 million for a patent sale 3 days after your wife filed for divorce? That is correct, Harvey answered smoothly, along with ongoing royalties estimated at $3 to $5 million annually for the next 20 years. Juliana's face had drained of all color. Preston, she whispered, her voice barely audible. Is this true? Every word, Preston replied calmly. The patent that Quantum rejected. The one you and Bradley searched my workshop for. The hobby project you mocked for years. The judge, an older woman with shrewd eyes, studied the documents carefully. Mrs. Novak, are you still seeking divorce from Mr. Novak? Juliana's attorney whispered urgently in her ear, but Juliana was still staring at Preston in shock. We need time to reconsider in light of this new information, her attorney said. Your Honor, Harvey interjected, my client has accepted the terms Mrs. Novak requested. The only modification is retaining his intellectual property, which, as we've just demonstrated, has considerable value. Mrs. Novak gets exactly what she asked for. The house, half the 401k, and alimony based on his previous salary. My client doesn't seek to modify those terms despite his changed circumstances. The judge looked at Juliana, whose composure had completely crumbled. Mrs. Novak, did you file for divorce because you believe your husband was financially unsuccessful? And no, Your Honor, Juliana stammered. Our marriage had other issues. Like her affair with Bradley Westmoreland? Harvey suggested mildly, producing a folder. We have evidence if the court requires it. The judge held up her hand. That won't be necessary, counselor. She looked between Preston and Juliana, her expression stern. I've seen many divorces in my time on the bench, but rarely one where the motivations were so transparent. Mrs. Novak filed specific demands, and Mr. Novak has agreed to them. I see no reason not to proceed. 3 hours later, Preston walked out of the courthouse, a divorced man. In the parking lot, Westmoreland was waiting, his face contorted with rage. You think you're clever, Novak, he snarled, stepping into Preston's path. But you've made a serious mistake. Nobody crosses me and gets away with it. Is that a threat, Mr. Westmoreland? Preston asked calmly. It's a promise, Westmoreland replied. By the time I'm done with you, you'll wish you'd never invented anything in your life. That patent money won't save you from what's coming. As Westmoreland stormed off, Juliana approached, her earlier shock replaced by calculation. Preston, we need to talk, she said. There's been a terrible misunderstanding. The misunderstanding was mine, Preston interrupted. I thought we were partners. Turns out I was just a stepping stone until something better came along. He started walking toward his car. You can't do this, Juliana called after him. I'm still the woman who stood by you for 15 years. Preston turned back. No, you're the woman who laughed when I lost my job and said you always knew I'd fail. Consider this my response. Chapter 4, Brewing Storm. The morning after the divorce was finalized, Preston woke in a modest hotel suite that belied his new wealth. His phone was flooded with messages from former colleagues who'd seen the courthouse records, old friends suddenly remembering his existence, and several increasingly desperate texts from Juliana. The most interesting message came from Harvey. Westmoreland made inquiries about appealing the divorce settlement. Judge denied without hearing. He's not taking it well. Preston smiled faintly. It had begun. Over breakfast, he opened his laptop to find an email from Darius with an encrypted attachment. You stirred up the hornet's nest, buddy. Westmoreland is livid. Attached is what my contact at Rival Tech sent. Internal memo about targeting your other projects. Watch your back. The memo outlined Westmoreland's instructions to his corporate espionage team. Identify Preston's ongoing research, find legal vulnerabilities in his patent applications, and neutralize the threat by any means necessary. Preston's phone rang, Vivian Russell, his patent attorney. "I assume you've heard," she said when he answered. "That Westmoreland's coming after me?" "Yes. It's worse than that. He's called in favors with the patent office to review your energy storage patent for potential prior art conflicts. It's a delaying tactic, but it could tie up your royalty payments for months." Preston considered this. Can he succeed in invalidating the patent? Extremely unlikely. Your documentation is impeccable, but that's not his real play. He wants to buy time to reverse engineer the technology, Preston concluded. Exactly. And without ongoing capital from royalties, he's betting you won't be able to legally fight him. He doesn't know about the lump sum payment. No, but that information won't stay private for long. Which means I need to move the money somewhere secure, Preston finished. "I'm on it." After hanging up, Preston made another call to Abigail Winters, cybersecurity specialist he'd worked with at Quantum. "Preston Novak," she greeted him warmly. "Heard you struck gold and made enemies in the same day. Impressive." "Thanks, Abby. I need your particular skill set." "To hide your money from Westmoreland?" she guessed. "To make him think he's found it," Preston corrected. "I need a convincing digital trail leading to accounts that appear vulnerable but actually contain only minimal funds." Abigail chuckled. "A honeypot. I like it. What exactly are you planning, Preston?" "Something appropriate for a man who built his fortune destroying others." 2 days later, Preston moved into a rental property on the outskirts of town, a nondescript ranch house with a converted garage perfect for a new workshop. He deliberately maintained a modest lifestyle, driving his old car and avoiding flashy purchases that would draw attention. The only luxury he allowed himself was state-of-the-art security and a reinforced workshop door. Inside that workshop, Preston began work on something new, a logical evolution of his energy storage technology that could make even his groundbreaking patent seem primitive by comparison. But unlike before, he documented nothing digitally, keeping all his notes in coded hard copy and components disguised as unrelated projects. 3 weeks into his new life, Preston's security system alerted him to a visitor, Veronica Hayes, Juliana's friend who had warned him before the divorce. "I shouldn't be here," she said nervously when he opened the door. "But you deserve to know. Juliana and Bradley are planning something. Something beyond legal challenges." Preston invited her in, maintaining a careful distance. "Why would you risk warning me again?" Veronica looked down. "Juliana was my friend for 20 years. The woman I knew would never have done what she's doing now. It's like Bradley's poisoned her mind." She met Preston's eyes. "She's convinced you have more patents pending, ones that could be worth even more than the first. She's feeding Bradley information about your work habits, your research patterns. And you know this how? Because she tried to recruit me to help." Veronica pulled out her phone, showing Preston text messages from Juliana asking her to reconnect with Preston and gather intelligence. Preston studied the messages carefully. "Thank you for showing me this, but I'm still not sure why you're helping me." Veronica's expression hardened. "Because I was married to someone like Bradley Westmoreland, a man who saw people as tools to be used and discarded. My ex-husband destroyed me financially, professionally, and nearly broke me psychologically. I won't stand by and watch it happen to someone else." After Veronica left, Preston called Darius and Abigail to his workshop for an emergency strategy session. If Westmoreland was escalating beyond legal channels, Preston needed to be prepared. "First," Darius said, placing a small device on the table, "we sweep for bugs." The sweep revealed 3 listening devices already planted in Preston's new home. One in the living room, one in the bedroom, and one on the exterior of his workshop. "Professional job," Abigail noted, examining one of the deactivated bugs. "Military grade. Your friend Westmoreland isn't playing around." "Then neither will I," Preston replied grimly. That night, Preston executed the first phase of his counteroffensive. While Abigail created a convincing digital trail showing Preston transferring his patent money to various investment accounts, Darius called in a favor from Lisa Zhang, a financial reporter for the Wall Street Journal. The next morning, a seemingly innocuous article appeared in the business section. "Energy innovation pioneer invests patent windfall in new research venture." The article deliberately included just enough information to point Westmoreland in specific directions without revealing Preston's actual plans. The bait was set. Chapter 5, Countermeasures. The sleek glass tower of Rival Tech headquarters gleamed in the morning sun as Bradley Westmoreland stormed into his corner office, slamming the Wall Street Journal onto his desk where Juliana waited. "Did you see this?" he demanded, jabbing his finger at the article about Preston's supposed new venture. Juliana skimmed it quickly. "This can't be right. Preston doesn't have the connections or business acumen to set up something like this. Apparently your ex-husband has been hiding more than just his patent," Westmoreland snarled. "He's managed a secure series of funding for a new energy company with that Chinese manufacturing conglomerate we've been trying to partner with for years." "Bradley, calm down," Juliana urged. "This might be an opportunity. I know how Preston works, his research patterns. If he's starting a new company, he'll need his research notes from our old house." Westmoreland's expression shifted from rage to calculation. "You still have access? My name is still on the deed, even if he got the money. The locks haven't been changed." She smiled coldly. "I think it's time I collected some personal belongings, don't you?" Across town, in a coffee shop with no security cameras, Preston sat with a woman he hadn't seen in years. Nina Zhao, the brilliant engineer who had left Quantum Dynamics after Westmoreland orchestrated a hostile takeover of her father's company. "You realize what you're asking," Nina said quietly after Preston outlined his proposal. "Westmoreland destroyed my family's legacy. My father died of a heart attack 3 months after losing his company. Why would I put myself in his orbit again?" "Because you're the only one who understands the technology well enough to make this work," Preston replied. "And because taking down Westmoreland properly requires someone he's already underestimated once." Nina stirred her coffee thoughtfully. "Your prototype really achieved those efficiency numbers?" "Better," Preston confirmed. "The patent I sold was just a foundation. What I'm working on now makes that look primitive. And you're willing to risk everything just to get revenge on Westmoreland and your ex-wife." Preston shook his head. "Not revenge. Justice. Westmoreland has built an empire by stealing other people's innovations and destroying lives. It's time someone turned the tables." Nina was silent for a long moment. "I'll need complete autonomy on the technical implementation, and a guarantee that when this is over, the technology goes open source. No more corporate monopolies." "Deal," Preston said without hesitation, extending his hand. That evening, Preston's security system alerted him to movement at his former home. Switching to the hidden cameras he'd never removed, he watched as Juliana and a man he didn't recognize searched the house, paying particular attention to hiding spots Preston had actually used during their marriage. Preston's phone rang. "Abigail." "They took the bait," she reported. "Someone just accessed the dummy research server we set up. They downloaded everything." "Perfect," Preston replied, watching as Juliana found exactly what he'd left for her to find: a flash drive hidden in a hollowed-out book. Phase 1 complete. The next day, an unexpected visitor arrived at Preston's rental. Mrs. Florence Whitaker, his former elderly neighbor, carrying what appeared to be another casserole. "I hope you don't mind the intrusion," she said when Preston opened the door. "But after what that dreadful woman did to you, I thought you could use a home-cooked meal." Preston smiled genuinely for the first time in weeks. "That's very kind, Mrs. Whitaker. Please come in." Once inside, Mrs. Whitaker's demeanor changed completely. She set down the casserole and fixed Preston with a shrewd look. "Now let's drop the pretense. I've been watching your wife and that pompous CEO coming and going from your old house. Yesterday, they left with what looked like your research materials." Preston blinked in surprise. "You've been monitoring them?" "Young man, I may be 78 years old, but I was an intelligence analyst for the government during the Cold War. Old habits die hard." She pulled a small notebook from her purse. "I've documented every visit, every unusual car, even photographed some of their associates. I thought you might find it useful." Preston leafed through the notebook, astonished at the meticulous detail. "Mrs. Whitaker, this is incredible. But why are you helping me?" She patted his hand. "Because you fixed my Wi-Fi without charging me an arm and a leg, and because I despise bullies. That Westmoreland fellow has a reputation, and not a good one." After Mrs. Whitaker left, Preston called Darius and shared the unexpected intelligence windfall. Together, they identified 3 of Westmoreland's key associates who had been to Preston's old house, including Rivaltech as head of R&D and their chief patent counsel. "They're moving faster than we anticipated," Darius warned. "If they're bringing in the patent team, they're already looking at filing competing patents based on your technology." "Good," Preston replied. "The faster they move, the less due diligence they'll do. Have Nina proceed with Phase 2. Phase 2 involved Nina infiltrating a major energy conference where Rivaltech was presenting their latest innovations. Using her credentials as a respected engineer, she gained access to their technical demonstration and planted specialized monitoring devices designed by Abigail that would transmit data on Rivaltech's development progress directly to Preston's secure server. Meanwhile, Preston himself made his first public appearance since the divorce, at a venture capital fundraising gala where he knew Juliana would be attending with Westmoreland. Dressed impeccably in a suit that subtly broadcast his new wealth, Preston circulated confidently through the crowd, shaking hands with investors and industry leaders. When Juliana spotted him across the room, her champagne glass froze halfway to her lips. Westmoreland, following her gaze, narrowed his eyes dangerously. Preston nodded politely in their direction before deliberately engaging in animated conversation with Clayton Rhodes, Westmoreland's biggest competitor. "Your ex-wife looks like she's seen a ghost," Rhodes commented, amused. "More like she's seen the future," Preston replied. "One where her actions have consequences." Later that evening, as Preston was leaving, Westmoreland intercepted him in the parking garage. "Enjoying your moment in the spotlight, Novak?" he sneered. "Don't get too comfortable. You're playing in the big leagues now, and you're way out of your depth." Preston regarded him calmly. "That's what Goliath thought about David, I imagine." Westmoreland stepped closer, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. "I've crushed dozens of upstarts like you. By the time I'm done, you'll wish you'd taken Juliana's pathetic attempt at reconciliation." "Fascinating," Preston replied. "You're threatened by me. I wonder why that is. Could it be because, deep down, you know you've never actually created anything of value? You've only stolen from others." Westmoreland's face contorted with rage. He grabbed Preston's lapel. "Listen carefully, you arrogant." "I wouldn't finish that sentence," came a cool female voice. Nina Zhao stepped from behind a pillar, smartphone raised. "Not unless you want your assault on camera." Westmoreland released Preston immediately, straightening his own jacket. "Ms. Zhao, I didn't realize you two knew each other." "There's a lot you don't realize, Bradley," Nina replied. "That's always been your weakness." As Westmoreland stalked away, Preston turned to Nina. "Perfect timing. Not coincidence," she said. "Your Mrs. Whitaker called to warn me he was following you to the parking garage. That woman is remarkable." Preston smiled. "Indeed she is." And now we move to Phase 3. Chapter 6, Escalation. The next 6 weeks saw a carefully orchestrated chess game unfold. Using the false research Juliana had stolen, Rivaltech began aggressively developing what they believed was Preston's next-generation energy technology. Their stock price climbed as rumors spread about a revolutionary breakthrough that would make Westmoreland's company the undisputed leader in the energy storage sector. Meanwhile, Preston maintained a deliberately low profile, working with Nina on the actual next-generation technology while feeding carefully crafted misinformation through channels they knew Westmoreland was monitoring. The plan was proceeding perfectly until an unexpected complication arose. Juliana filed an emergency petition with the family court, claiming Preston had concealed assets during their divorce proceedings. "It's a fishing expedition," Harvey assured Preston during an emergency meeting. "She has no proof, but it's a legal maneuver to force additional disclosure and potentially reopen the settlement." "Can she succeed?" Preston asked. "Unlikely, but it will drain resources and attention at a critical time," Harvey replied, "which is exactly what Westmoreland wants." That same day, Preston received an alarming call from Darius. "We've been compromised. Someone broke into my apartment and copied my hard drive. Were you backing up the actual research?" Preston asked urgently. "No, I'm not an idiot," Darius retorted. but they got access to our communications. They know about Nina. Preston's blood ran cold. Nina was the linchpin of their entire plan. If Westmoreland discovered her role, get to a secure location, Preston instructed. I'll warn Nina, but it was already too late. When Preston tried to reach Nina, her phone went straight to voicemail. A frantic call to her apartment manager revealed that two men claiming to be police officers had escorted her from the building 3 hours earlier. Preston immediately activated emergency protocols, contacting Abigail and Mrs. Whitaker. Find her, he instructed. Use whatever resources you need. While they searched, Preston received an unexpected call from Westmoreland himself. Missing something, Novak? Westmoreland's voice oozed satisfaction. If you've harmed Nina, Ms. Zhao is perfectly comfortable, Westmoreland interrupted. She's simply helping my team understand some technical inconsistencies in your research. Strange how the formulas you left for Juliana to find don't quite work in practical application. Preston's mind raced. Westmoreland had figured out the deception. What do you want? Preston asked, keeping his voice steady. Simple. The actual research. All of it. In exchange for Ms. Zhao's safe return and my agreement not to press industrial espionage charges against both of you. You have no grounds for such charges, don't I? Your little honeypot scheme involved deliberately planting false information to mislead a competitor. My legal team assures me that crosses several lines, especially given your prior knowledge of our interest. Westmoreland was bluffing, but it wouldn't matter if he had Nina. I'll need proof she's unharmed, Preston insisted. Check your email. Preston's inbox contained a video of Nina in what appeared to be a conference room, visibly angry but unharmed, with that day's newspaper visible. You have 24 hours, Westmoreland said. And Novak, if you involve the police, our arrangement changes dramatically. After Westmoreland hung up, Preston immediately called a crisis meeting with his team at a secure location, Mrs. Whitaker's basement, which they determined was the only place guaranteed to be free of Westmoreland surveillance. It's a trap, Darius stated flatly after Preston explained the situation. The moment you hand over the research, he'll have no reason to release Nina. Agreed, Abigail added. And once he has the actual technology, he'll use it to destroy you legally and financially. Mrs. Whitaker, who had insisted on joining the meeting, spoke up. You're all missing something obvious. Where exactly is this girl being held? The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The video background, Preston realized. It's not some remote location. That's the executive conference room at Rival Tech headquarters. Mrs. Whitaker nodded approvingly. Corporate kidnapping is messy. They want deniability. My guess is they're calling it a job interview or a consulting opportunity gone long. She's probably being watched but not restrained. That gives us options, Preston said, feeling hope for the first time since Westmoreland's call. Abigail, can you access Rival Tech's security system? Not remotely, she admitted. Their cybersecurity is too good. I need physical access to their internal network. Which means someone needs to get inside, Darius concluded. All eyes turned to Preston. He'd never let me in the building. Preston objected. He would if you were surrendering, Mrs. Whitaker suggested, bringing the research personally as a show of good faith. A plan began to form in Preston's mind. Dangerous, but potentially effective. I'll need a convincing decoy, he said slowly. Something that would pass initial inspection. I can handle that, Darius offered. But getting in is one thing. Getting both you and Nina out safely is another. Mrs. Whitaker smiled enigmatically. Leave that to me. I may still have some contacts from my government days. 23 hours later, Preston arrived at Rival Tech headquarters with a secure hard drive and printed schematics. As expected, he was escorted directly to Westmoreland's office, where Juliana was also waiting, looking triumphant. I have to admit, I'm surprised, Westmoreland said, leaning back in his chair. I expected more resistance. Nina's safety is more important than any technology, Preston replied, setting down the hard drive. Juliana moved forward eagerly. Is this everything? Everything about the enhanced energy storage system, Preston confirmed. Now, where's Nina? Westmoreland pressed a button on his desk. Bring Ms. Zhao to my office. While they waited, Westmoreland's technical team began reviewing the materials Preston had brought. Their initial excitement gradually gave way to confusion. "Sir," one technician said hesitantly, "these formulas are similar to what we already have, but there are key differences." "Improvements," Preston supplied. "The versions Juliana stole were intentionally flawed. These will actually work." Westmoreland studied Preston suspiciously. "You gave in too easily." "As I said, Nina's safety takes priority." The office door opened, and Nina was escorted in by 2 security guards. Her eyes widened slightly when she saw Preston, but she maintained her composure. "Preston," she acknowledged coolly. "You shouldn't have come." "Touching reunion," Westmoreland mocked. "Now, Ms. Zhao, perhaps you can verify that what Mr. Novak brought us is legitimate." Nina examined the schematics carefully. "These appear correct. The resonance formulas match my understanding of Preston's approach." "Excellent," Westmoreland said, his earlier suspicion fading. "Phillips, escort Ms. Zhao out. Mr. Novak and I have a few details to finalize." As the security guard moved toward Nina, the lights in the office suddenly flickered. A moment later, the building's fire alarm blared. "What the hell?" Westmoreland snapped, reaching for his phone. In that moment of distraction, Preston moved with unexpected speed. He grabbed the hard drive, shoved Westmoreland's desk against him, pinning him momentarily to the wall, and bolted for the door with Nina. "Stop them!" Juliana screamed, but the security guards were already responding to the fire alarm, herding people toward emergency exits. Preston and Nina raced down the corridor toward the stairs, following the evacuation route. In the chaos of employees evacuating, they blended in with the crowd. Outside, a nondescript van waited with its side door open. Darius was behind the wheel, and Mrs. Whitaker, improbably, sat in the passenger seat wearing what appeared to be a fire marshal's jacket. "Right on schedule," she commented as Preston and Nina leapt into the van. "My friend in the building maintenance department came through with the alarm override." As they sped away, Preston handed the hard drive to Nina. "Did they get anything useful from you?" "Nothing they can use," Nina assured him. "I fed them plenty of technically accurate, but practically useless information." Classic misdirection. Preston nodded, relieved. "Then we proceed with the final phase." From the rear window, they could see Westmoreland outside his building, face contorted with rage as he watched employees evacuating while firefighters entered. "He'll come after us harder now," Darius warned, navigating through traffic. "Let him," Preston replied grimly. Everything is in place for what comes next. Chapter 7. The Turning Point. 2 days after the escape from Rival Tech, Preston sat with his team in a secure warehouse that had been converted into a temporary headquarters. The walls were covered with flowcharts, timelines, and surveillance photos, a visual representation of their plan to bring down Bradley Westmoreland. "He's accelerated production based on the formulas you gave him," Abigail reported, reviewing data from their sources inside Rival Tech. "They've diverted nearly $50 million in resources to build a prototype." "And their stock?" Preston asked. Darius pulled up a financial chart. "Up 22% on rumors of the breakthrough." Westmoreland's been making the rounds with major investors, promising a revolution in energy storage. "Perfect," Preston nodded. "And the SEC filing?" "Submitted anonymously this morning," Harvey confirmed, detailing Westmoreland's history of corporate espionage with supporting evidence. Nina, who had been examining technical readouts, looked up. "Based on the modifications I made to the formulas, their prototype should function initially but experience a catastrophic resonance failure when scaled up." "Catastrophic how?" Mrs. Whitaker asked. "Not dangerous," Nina clarified, "but spectacular and embarrassing. The energy containment will fail dramatically. Lots of noise and light, but no real danger. Like a very expensive fireworks display." Preston checked his watch. Rival Tech's major product demonstration is in 3 days. Everything needs to be in position by then. The team dispersed to complete their assignments, leaving Preston alone with Mrs. Whitaker. "You're taking an enormous risk," she said quietly. "Westmoreland has resources, connections. Even if this works." "I know," Preston acknowledged. "But it's not just about revenge anymore. It's about justice for everyone he's destroyed. Mrs. Whitaker studied him thoughtfully. It wasn't always, though, was it? This started as revenge against your wife. Preston was silent for a moment. When Juliana mocked me after I lost my job, yes, I wanted her to regret those words. But seeing how Westmoreland operates, how many lives he's ruined, including Nina's family, he shook his head. This is bigger than my wounded pride now. Good. Mrs. Whitaker nodded approvingly. Revenge consumes the revenger. Justice serves a purpose beyond oneself. Later that evening, Preston received an unexpected call from Veronica, Juliana's former friend. Juliana's terrified. She reported without preamble. Westmoreland is blaming her for the flawed information. He threatened her. Preston frowned. Despite everything, he didn't wish Juliana physical harm. Threatened how? He said if the prototype fails, she'll pay the price for her incompetence. Preston, I've never seen him like this. He's unraveling. Tell her to distance herself from him. Preston advised. Stay somewhere he can't find her until after the demonstration. She won't listen to me anymore, Veronica said helplessly. She's convinced you're the enemy, that you're trying to destroy her along with Westmoreland. After hanging up, Preston contemplated this new development. Juliana had betrayed him, mocked him, conspired against him, but he'd never intended for her to be in physical danger. He called Harvey. We need a contingency plan for Juliana's safety. The next morning, an unexpected opportunity arose. Nina's contacts in the energy industry reported that a major international consortium, the same one that had purchased Preston's original patent, was sending representatives to rival Tekka's demonstration, considering a potential partnership if the technology proved viable. This changes everything, Preston realized. If we can get the consortium representatives alone before the demonstration. They adjusted their plan accordingly. Nina would use her industry credentials to arrange a private meeting with the consortium representatives, ostensibly to discuss technical concerns about rival Tekka's claims. Meanwhile, Preston faced a direct challenge from Westmoreland, a cease and desist order claiming that Preston's current research violated rival Tekka's intellectual property rights. It's baseless, Harvey assured him after reviewing the legal documents. They're claiming ownership of technology they don't even fully understand. But fighting this in court would drain resources and create delays, which is exactly what Westmoreland wants, Preston concluded. He's trying to distract us from the demonstration. Preston countered by having Harvey file an emergency injunction against rival tech, claiming their upcoming demonstration involved stolen technology. The legal maneuver wouldn't stop the demonstration, but it created a cloud of doubt that business reporters were already discussing in pre-event coverage. The day before the demonstration, Preston received a text from an unknown number. Need to meet. Urgent. About Juliana. V. Against his team's advice, Preston agreed to meet Veronica at a public cafe. But when he arrived, it wasn't Veronica waiting, it was Juliana. Clever, Preston acknowledged, sliding into the booth across from her. Using Veronica's initial. Juliana looked terrible, clothes impeccable as always, but her eyes were red-rimmed and her hands trembled slightly. I had to see you, she said. Bradley's lost his mind. He's obsessed with destroying you. That seems to be going around, Preston observed dryly. You don't understand, Juliana insisted. He's talking about more than business now. He has people following you, looking for vulnerabilities. Your friend Darius, that elderly neighbor, the Asian engineer woman, they're all being watched. Preston kept his expression neutral, but internally, alarm bells were ringing. Why are you telling me this? Juliana looked down at her untouched coffee. Because I never thought it would go this far. I wanted the divorce, yes. I wanted a better life with Bradley. But I never wanted. She trailed off. Never wanted what? To destroy me completely? To help Westmoreland steal technology that could benefit millions of people? To make me regret ever trusting you? Preston's voice remained calm, but each question hit like a precision strike. Juliana flinched. I was wrong, she whispered. About you. About Bradley. About everything. Preston studied her carefully, looking for the manipulation, the angle. What do you want, Juliana? A way out, she said simply. Bradley controls everything now. My finances, my housing, my social circle. I have nothing of my own left. That sounds familiar, Preston replied coldly. How does it feel? Tears welled in Juliana's eyes. I deserve that. I deserve all of it. But Preston, I'm scared of him now. Despite his resolve, Preston felt a flicker of the protectiveness he'd once felt for her. What are you proposing? Information, Juliana said. I know Bradley's security protocols, his private server passwords, his real plans for the demonstration tomorrow. I'll trade everything I know for protection and... She hesitated, a fresh start away from all of this. Preston was silent for a long moment. I'll need verification of the information first. Juliana slid a USB drive across the table, copied from his home office last night while he was sleeping. Preston pocketed the drive. I'll have this checked. If it's legitimate, we'll discuss terms for your protection. As he stood to leave, Juliana caught his hand. Preston, I am sorry. For what it's worth. Preston gently removed his hand from hers. I know, but some things can't be undone with an apology. Back at their headquarters, Abigail examined the USB drive carefully for malware before accessing its contents. It's clean, she confirmed, and it's a gold mine. Security protocols, financial records, emails outlining their entire corporate espionage operation. If this is legitimate, it's everything we need and more. Too convenient, Darius argued. It has to be a trap. Not necessarily, Nina countered. I've seen this before. When Westmoreland targeted my father's company, he turned on his own allies once he had what he wanted from them. If he's abusing Juliana now... Preston made his decision. We use the information, but cautiously, and we extract Juliana from Westmoreland's orbit. Not for her sake, but because a desperate Juliana might warn Westmoreland about our plans. With less than 24 hours until the demonstration, Preston's team worked through the night, incorporating the new information into their strategy. The pieces were falling into place for the most important confrontation of their lives. Chapter 8. The Demonstration. The morning of Rivaltech's demonstration dawned clear and bright, a perfect backdrop for what business media was calling the Energy Revolution unveiling. Outside the gleaming convention center, reporters and industry analysts gathered while security checked credentials with meticulous care. Preston, wearing a maintenance worker's uniform and ID badge created by Abigail, moved inconspicuously through the service corridors. Through his earpiece, he could hear the team's coordinated movements. VIP entrance secure, came Darius's voice. Consortium representatives arriving in 20 minutes. Monitoring stations active, Abigail reported. I have eyes on all security cameras. Westmoreland just entered the main presentation hall, added Mrs. Whitaker, improbably disguised as a senior business reporter. Juliana's with him. She looks terrified. Preston made his way to a maintenance closet near the presentation hall's rear entrance. Inside, he changed into an impeccable suit and attached a small, sophisticated recording device to his lapel. Nina, status? He asked quietly. In position, she replied. Consortium representatives diverted to the executive lounge for a pre-presentation briefing. Standing by with the technical documentation, Preston checked his watch. 30 minutes until the demonstration began. Executing Phase 1, he confirmed, leaving the closet and walking confidently toward the executive lounge. Inside, Nina was already deep in conversation with 5 serious-looking executives from the international consortium that had purchased Preston's original patent. Ah, Mr. Novak, she said smoothly as he entered. Perfect timing. I was just explaining the technical discrepancies in Rivaltech's claims. The consortium's technical director, Dr. Leonid Volkov, fixed Preston with a penetrating stare. Mr. Novak, your presence here is unexpected. Mr. Westmoreland has spoken quite negatively about you. I'm sure he has, Preston replied calmly, taking a seat. Which is why I thought you deserved to hear directly from me before investing billions in his supposed breakthrough. For the next 15 minutes, Preston and Nina dismantled Rivaltech's technical claims, providing evidence that their revolutionary technology was based on fundamentally flawed applications of Preston's original work. The demonstration today will initially seem impressive, Nina explained, showing simulation results. But the containment field will destabilize at precisely 85% capacity. Dr. Volkov looked troubled. These are serious allegations. What evidence do you have beyond theoretical projections? Preston handed him a tablet containing the files from Juliana's USB drive. Rivaltech's own internal testing data, security camera footage from their labs showing previous failed tests, and emails discussing how to conceal the flaws during today's demonstration. The consortium representatives exchanged alarmed glances. If what you're saying is true, Dr. Volkov said slowly, this represents not just technical failure, but deliberate fraud. Exactly, Preston confirmed. And as the original patent holder, I felt ethically obligated to warn you before you committed your resources. The consortium's legal counsel leaned forward. Mr. Novak, would you be willing to provide sworn testimony about these allegations? I would, Preston agreed. But first, I suggest you witness the demonstration yourselves. The evidence will be unmistakable. As the meeting concluded, Preston received an urgent message from Abigail. Emergency. Westmoreland knows you're here. Security's searching for you now. Preston calmly thanked the consortium representatives and exited through a side door, where Darius was waiting with his maintenance uniform. Quick change, Darius urged. They've got your description at every entrance. Preston swapped outfits rapidly. Nina, safe. Heading to the observation position. Disguised once more, Preston made his way to the presentation hall's upper level, where a small technical booth provided both cover and a perfect view of the stage. Below, hundreds of investors, industry leaders, and media representatives filled the seats while technical staff made final adjustments to Rivaltech's prototype, a sleek, futuristic-looking energy storage unit positioned center stage. 5 minutes to presentation, came Abigail's voice. Westmoreland's looking nervous. He keeps checking his phone. Preston scanned the front row and spotted Juliana, sitting rigidly beside an empty seat presumably reserved for Westmoreland. Her gaze darted anxiously around the room. Is the recording system active? Preston asked. All set, Darius confirmed. Every moment will be captured in glorious high definition. At precisely 10 a.m., the lights dimmed and Bradley Westmoreland strode confidently onto the stage to enthusiastic applause. Despite Abigail's observation about his nervousness, he appeared completely in control, the embodiment of corporate success in his bespoke suit and practiced smile. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice booming through the hall speakers. Today marks the beginning of a new era in energy technology. For 15 minutes, Westmoreland delivered a masterful presentation, outlining the world's energy challenges and positioning Rivaltech's new storage technology as the definitive solution. Animated graphics demonstrated the potential applications, from grid-scale implementation to revolutionary transportation systems. But you didn't come here for theory, Westmoreland concluded with a confident smile. You came for proof. Allow me to demonstrate the future of energy storage. He gestured dramatically toward the prototype. Rivaltech's technical team began the power-up sequence, monitoring displays showing the storage unit gradually accepting electrical input. Notice the stability, Westmoreland narrated as the capacity indicators climbed. Our proprietary containment system allows for unprecedented energy density without degradation. At 50% capacity, the audience applauded as the unit continued functioning perfectly. At 70% capacity, Westmoreland was beaming, pointing out the exceptional efficiency readings. At 82% capacity, the first warning light appeared on the monitoring station. One of the technicians frowned, whispering urgently to his colleague. A minor calibration issue, Westmoreland assured the audience smoothly. Perfectly normal during demonstrations. We'll continue to 100% capacity to show the full capabilities. At 84% capacity, a high-pitched whine emanated from the unit. The technical team's body language shifted from concern to alarm. Sir, one technician said loudly enough for the front rows to hear, we should initiate emergency shutdown protocols. Continue the demonstration, Westmoreland ordered tersely. At 85% capacity, exactly as Preston and Nina had predicted, the containment field failed spectacularly. A blinding flash of blue-white light erupted from the unit, followed by an ear-splitting crack. The prototype's outer casing shattered, components flying in all directions as arcs of electricity danced across the stage. The audience gasped collectively, some rising from their seats in alarm. Westmoreland stood frozen, his expression shifting from confidence to horror as his career-defining moment disintegrated before his eyes. From his vantage point, Preston watched dispassionately as Rival Tech's technical team scrambled to contain the failure, emergency systems activating to prevent electrical fires. The demonstration had failed even more dramatically than anticipated. Phase 2 complete, he murmured into his communication device. Initiating Phase 3. As the chaos unfolded on stage, Preston made his way down to the main floor, where security was focused entirely on the stage situation. He approached the consortium representatives, who were watching the debacle with expressions ranging from shock to anger. Exactly as predicted, Preston said quietly to Dr. Volkov, down to the percentage point of failure. Volkov turned to him, eyes narrowed. You knew exactly what would happen. Because I understand the technology, Preston confirmed. As I explained earlier, Rival Tech's approach was fundamentally flawed. Before Volkov could respond, his attention was drawn to the stage, where Westmoreland was engaged in a heated argument with his technical team. Even over the commotion of the crowd, snippets of their exchange were audible. You assured me this was resolved. The modifications were untested. I don't want excuses. Fix this now. As security began evacuating the hall, Preston noticed Juliana slipping away through a side exit. Following a prearranged plan, Mrs. Whitaker intercepted her, guiding her toward a service corridor where Darius waited. Preston himself moved toward the stage, where Westmoreland was desperately trying to salvage the situation, calling for technical explanations and promising a follow-up demonstration to stunned investors who were already heading for the exits. Seeing Preston approaching, Westmoreland's professional demeanor cracked completely. You, he snarled, pointing accusingly. You did this. You sabotaged us. Several nearby reporters swiveled, cameras and microphones instantly focused on the confrontation. I sabotaged nothing, Mr. Westmoreland, Preston replied calmly, aware of the recording devices. Your prototype failed because your team tried to implement technology they didn't fully understand. Technology based on stolen research. That's a lot. Westmoreland snapped, advancing toward Preston aggressively. Security, remove this man immediately. Before they do, Preston continued evenly. I think these reporters would be interested in your corporate espionage operation. The one documented in files from your own servers. Westmoreland froze, his face paling. What files? The ones currently being reviewed by the SEC, Preston said, loud enough for nearby journalists to hear clearly. Along with evidence of your attempt to kidnap engineer Nina Zhao to extract proprietary information. The reporters erupted with questions, cameras flashing as Westmoreland's expression contorted with rage. You've destroyed yourself, Novak, he hissed, lunging forward and grabbing Preston's lapel. I will burn everything you've built to the ground. Security officers rushed forward, pulling Westmoreland back as he continued shouting threats. The entire exchange was captured by dozens of cameras, exactly as Preston had planned. As security escorted Preston from the building, he received confirmation from his team. Juliana was secure, Nina had additional private meetings scheduled with the consortium representatives, and Harvey was preparing to file formal complaints against Rival Tech with multiple regulatory agencies. Outside, in a nearby cafe, Preston watched live streams of the aftermath. Business news networks were already reporting on the catastrophic failure of Rival Tech's revolutionary technology, with financial analysts predicting severe consequences for the company's stock price. Phase 3 complete. Preston murmured, closing his laptop. Now we wait for the avalanche. Chapter 9. The Reckoning. The avalanche came faster and more devastatingly than even Preston had anticipated. By that evening, Rivaltech's stock had plummeted 37%, triggering circuit breakers and emergency board meetings. Video of Westmoreland's confrontation with Preston had gone viral, his threats and accusations making headlines across business news outlets. Meanwhile, the SEC announced a formal investigation into Rivaltech based on credible evidence of securities fraud and corporate espionage, causing another wave of panic selling when markets opened the following day. Preston monitored the unfolding chaos from the team's secure headquarters, where Juliana had been brought after the demonstration. "I never thought it would collapse this quickly," she said, watching CNBC's coverage of protesters outside Rivaltech headquarters, former employees and investors demanding answers. "Westmoreland built his empire on sand," Preston replied. "Once the first structural support failed, the rest was inevitable." Juliana looked at him searchingly. "Did you plan all of this from the beginning? Since the divorce?" "Not specifically," Preston admitted, "but I knew his type. Men like Westmoreland succeed through intimidation and theft, not innovation. They're always vulnerable to the truth." For days after the failed demonstration, Harvey arrived with news from his legal contacts. "Rivaltech's board has called an emergency session," he reported. "They're voting to remove Westmoreland as CEO. Their major creditors are calling in loans, and at least 3 class action lawsuits have been filed by shareholders." "And the patent situation?" Preston asked. "Complete vindication," Harvey confirmed with satisfaction. "The Patent Office has formally rejected all of Rivaltech's applications related to the energy storage technology. More importantly, the consortium has reached out about accelerating development of your next-generation system." Preston nodded, satisfied but not triumphant. This had never been about personal glory. Darius, monitoring news feeds, suddenly straightened. "You're going to want to see this," he said, turning up the volume on a breaking news report. On screen, federal agents were escorting a handcuffed Bradley Westmoreland from Rivaltech headquarters. The ticker below read, "Rivaltech CEO arrested on charges of securities fraud, corporate espionage, and witness intimidation." The room fell silent as they watched Westmoreland, disheveled and raging, being placed in an unmarked vehicle. "It's over," Nina said quietly. "Not quite," Preston replied, turning to Juliana. "There's still your situation to resolve." Juliana looked down, the weight of her choices evident in her posture. "I don't deserve your help, Preston. What I did to you, this isn't about what you deserve," Preston interrupted. "It's about closing this chapter completely." The next morning, Preston met with Harvey and a financial advisor to structure what he called the final settlement. Using a portion of his patent proceeds, he established a trust that would provide Juliana with a modest but comfortable living, conditional on 3 requirements. She would relocate to another state, sign comprehensive non-disclosure agreements regarding Preston's work and personal life, and commit to voluntary community service. "Why are you doing this?" Juliana asked when he presented the offer. "After everything I did, you could leave me with nothing. Many would say I deserve that." Preston considered the question carefully. "Because carrying hatred forward serves no purpose. I'm not forgiving what you did. I'm just refusing to let it define my future." 1 week later, as Juliana prepared to leave for her new life in Arizona, she asked for a final private conversation with Preston. "I've been thinking about what you said," she began hesitantly, "about not letting the past define the future. I want you to know I understand now what I threw away." She looked at him with genuine regret. "You were never a failure, Preston. I was too blind to see what was right in front of me." Preston regarded her thoughtfully. In another lifetime, these words might have meant everything to him. Now, they were simply an epilogue to a closed chapter. "I hope you find what you're looking for, Juliana," he said sincerely. "Just make sure it's something real this time." After Juliana's departure, Preston gathered his team for a final strategy session. With Westmoreland facing criminal charges and Rivaltech in freefall, their immediate objectives had been achieved. The question now was what came next. "The consortium wants to fast-track development of the next-generation system," Nina reported. "They're offering extraordinary terms, and several venture capital firms have reached out about funding a startup with you at the helm," Darius added. Preston considered these opportunities. 6 months ago, his life had been defined by a job he'd lost and a marriage crumbling around him. Now, the possibilities seemed limitless. "I have something else in mind," he said finally. "Something that honors why we did this in the first place." 3 months later, in a converted warehouse that had once been their secret headquarters, Preston officially launched the Novak Innovation Foundation. With initial funding of $40 million from his patent proceeds, the foundation would support independent inventors and engineers whose promising ideas had been rejected by corporate interests, people exactly like Preston had once been. Nina agreed to serve as technical director, with Darius heading operations and Mrs. Whitaker, despite her protests about being too old for a new career, as security advisor. Even Veronica joined the team, leveraging her social connections to build bridges with potential partners. At the launch event, a reporter asked Preston what had inspired the foundation's mission. "I learned firsthand how the innovation ecosystem can fail brilliant ideas and the people behind them," he replied. "But I also learned that with the right support network, those same ideas can change the world. We're not just funding inventions, we're protecting inventors." Later that evening, alone in his office, Preston reviewed the day's press coverage. His revenge against Westmoreland and Juliana had metamorphosed into something far more meaningful, a purpose that looked forward rather than back. On his desk sat a framed quote he'd selected as the foundation's motto, words that had guided him through his darkest moments after losing his job and discovering his wife's betrayal. "Success is not final. Failure is not fatal. It is the courage to continue that counts." Preston smiled at the irony. His journey had begun with a wife who laughed at his supposed failure, convinced he'd never amount to anything. Now her mockery had transformed into the catalyst for his greatest achievement. Not the millions from his patent, but the opportunity to ensure that other underestimated innovators would never have to walk the path he had traveled alone. Outside his window, the lights of the city sparkled like possibilities. The past was settled. The future awaited. Epilogue. 15 years later, the autumn sun cast long shadows across the Novak Innovation Campus as Preston made his way from the main research building toward the central courtyard. At 58, his hair had turned completely silver, lending him a distinguished appearance that suited his role as one of the most influential figures in American innovation. The campus, 5 modern buildings arranged around a verdant plaza in what had once been an abandoned industrial district, hummed with activity as researchers, engineers, and entrepreneurs collaborated on technologies that would shape the coming decades. Preston paused to observe a group of young inventors demonstrating a prototype to potential investors. The quarterly innovation showcase had become a coveted opportunity for emerging talent, with over 80% of feature projects securing funding. That success rate was just one of many metrics that testified to how far the Novak Innovation Foundation had come in 15 years. "Admiring your kingdom," came a familiar voice behind him. Preston turned to find Nina Zhao approaching, tablet in hand, her practical business attire contrasting with the excited grad students nearby. At 53, Nina had retained her sharp intelligence and no-nonsense demeanor, though decades of leadership had softened her once rigid professional boundaries. The small streaks of gray in her otherwise black hair were the only real indication of the years that had passed. "Just remembering what this place used to be," Preston replied with a smile. "Hard to believe it was once our emergency headquarters during the Westmoreland situation." Nina nodded, glancing around at the thriving campus. From Revenge Plot Command Center to Innovation Ecosystem. Quite the transformation. She checked her watch. "Everyone's gathering in the Memorial Garden. Are you ready?" Preston took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." They walked together across the campus, exchanging greetings with researchers and staff. The Novak Innovation Foundation had grown beyond anything Preston had envisioned when he'd launched it with his initial $40 million. Now, with a $4.7 billion endowment and over 300 employees, the foundation had supported more than 500 independent innovators and launched 78 successful companies. But it was the stories behind those numbers, the lives changed, the breakthroughs achieved, that gave Preston the most satisfaction. The Memorial Garden occupied a quiet corner of the campus, centered around a simple granite monument inscribed with a quote from Florence Whitaker. "The future belongs to those who see possibilities before they become obvious." The elderly neighbor who had played such a crucial role in Preston's revenge and subsequent redemption had passed away 5 years earlier at the age of 88, working as the Foundation's security advisor until almost the very end. A small crowd had already gathered beneath the Japanese maple trees that Florence had insisted on planting herself. Darius Fleming stood at the front, still imposing at 60 despite the cane he now used after a skiing accident 3 years ago. As Chief Operations Officer, he'd been instrumental in scaling the Foundation's impact, creating systems that identified promising innovators who'd been overlooked by traditional venture capital. Beside him stood Abigail Winters, now the Foundation's Chief Technology Officer. Her cybersecurity expertise had evolved into a broader technology strategy role, guiding the Foundation's investments in emerging fields. At 49, she remained as sharp and direct as ever, known for her uncanny ability to identify transformative technologies in their earliest stages. "There he is," called out a stocky man with a military-precise haircut. Garrett Whitaker, Florence's grandson and a former Navy SEAL, had joined the Foundation after his grandmother's death, carrying on her legacy in security oversight. "We were starting to think you'd backed out, boss." "Just taking a moment to reflect," Preston replied, joining the group. His eyes swept over the assembled faces. Every senior team member was present, along with several of the Foundation's earliest supported inventors and a few select friends who knew the true story behind the Novak Innovation Foundation's inception. Even Harvey Blackwood had made the trip from his retirement home in Florida, still dapper at 78, though significantly frilier than during his days as Preston's divorce attorney. In the years following the Westmoreland incident, Harvey had become a trusted advisor to the Foundation before retiring a decade ago. "Shall we begin?" suggested Veronica Hayes, who had transformed from Juliana's reluctant friend into the Foundation's formidable head of external relations. Her social connections had proven invaluable in building the Foundation's network, though few knew of her role in the events that had set everything in motion. Preston nodded, turning toward the simple podium that had been set up for the occasion. Today marked 15 years since the Novak Innovation Foundation's official launch. 15 years since Preston had channeled his pain and vindication into something lasting and meaningful. "Thank you all for coming," he began, surveying the faces of people who had become far more than colleagues over the years. 15 years ago today, we gathered in a converted warehouse with a simple mission: to support independent innovators whose brilliant ideas have been rejected by short-sighted corporate interests. He paused, memories washing over him. "What many of you don't know is that this foundation was born from one of the darkest periods of my life, a time when I lost my job, my marriage, and nearly my faith in the system that was supposed to reward innovation rather than crush it." A few of the gathered staff exchanged surprised glances. Preston rarely spoke about his personal history. For those who weren't there at the beginning, the story of this foundation is inextricably linked to my own patent for energy storage technology that was dismissed by my employer, mocked by my then-wife, and nearly stolen by corporate raiders. The $67 million from that patent sale not only changed my life, but created the opportunity to ensure other innovators wouldn't face the same obstacles. Preston gestured to the campus around them. What began as an act of, let's call it creative justice, has grown into something I could never have imagined. Today, Novak-supported technologies provide clean energy to over 200 million people worldwide. Our Medical Innovation Fund has helped develop treatments benefiting patients with conditions once considered untreatable. And our commitment to open-source innovation has transformed industries that were once dominated by monopolistic practices. He smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. Florence Whitaker, whose memory we honor in this garden, once told me that revenge consumes the revenger, but justice serves a purpose beyond oneself. She was right, as she so often was. The best revenge wasn't destroying those who wronged me. It was creating something they could never have envisioned or accomplished. As Preston continued his address, none of those gathered were aware of being observed from a distance. At the edge of the campus, A woman in her late 50s sat in a modest rental car, watching the ceremony through binoculars. Juliana Martinez, formerly Novak, had honored her agreement to relocate and maintain her distance from Preston's life. The trust he had established provided her with enough for a comfortable, if modest, existence in Tucson, where she had eventually found purpose working with at-risk youth, her community service requirement evolving into a genuine calling. She had followed Preston's success from afar, reading about the foundation's achievements and occasionally glimpsing him in business publications or technology news. Today's 15th anniversary had drawn her back, not to interfere, but simply to see with her own eyes what might have been had she made different choices. As Juliana watched Preston speaking confidently to his assembled team, she felt not envy, but a complex mixture of regret and pride. The man she had once dismissed as a failure had changed the world, while the man she had left him for had become a cautionary tale in business ethics courses. Bradley Westmoreland had served 4 years in a minimum security prison for securities fraud and corporate espionage before being released. Barred from serving as an officer in any publicly traded company, he had attempted several comeback ventures, each ending in failure and further litigation. The last Juliana had heard, he was living in obscurity in Tampa, writing a never-to-be-published memoir about his persecution by the innovation establishment. Juliana started her car and drove away before the ceremony concluded. She had seen enough, not just of the present, but of the divergent paths that had stemmed from the choices made 15 years ago. Impressive speech, Nina commented as she and Preston walked back toward the main research building after the ceremony. Though you left out some of the more colorful details of our foundation story. Preston chuckled. Somehow I don't think we founded this organization after executing an elaborate revenge scheme would play well in our next annual report. Fair point, Nina conceded with a smile. Though the actual story would make one hell of a business school case study. They reached Preston's office, a deliberately modest space that reflected his continued aversion to ostentation despite his wealth. The walls displayed not awards or accolades, but photographs of inventors the foundation had supported alongside prototypes of their most significant innovations. Have you seen the latest test results from the Sing team? Nina asked, handing Preston her tablet. Their superconducting material is showing stability at temperatures we thought impossible 5 years ago. Preston scrolled through the data, impressed. Dr. Arjun Singh had been one of the Foundation's earliest supported scientists, a brilliant materials researcher whose unconventional approaches have been rejected by traditional funding sources. Now, his work promised to revolutionize energy transmission globally. Notify the patent team, Preston decided. We'll follow the usual protocol, shared licensing with priority access for developing regions. The Foundation's patent policy had become one of its most influential innovations. Rather than hoarding intellectual property, the Novak model emphasized strategic protection combined with humanitarian licensing terms, ensuring technologies reach those who needed them most while still generating sustainable returns for continued innovation. Nina made a note. Also, Dr. Volkov called again about the consortium's acquisition offer. Preston sighed. Dr. Leonid Volkov, once the technical director who had witnessed Westmoreland's spectacular failure, had risen to lead the international energy consortium that had purchased Preston's original patent. Over the years, the relationship had evolved from cautious partnership to deep collaboration. Recently, however, Volkov had begun suggesting that the Foundation would achieve greater impact by being absorbed into the consortium structure. Same answer as before, Preston replied. We maintain our independence. He's persistent, Nina observed. The offer increased another 15%. It's not about the money, Preston said firmly. Independence is what allows us to take the risks traditional organizations won't. He gestured toward his wall of innovator photos. Every person there was rejected by the established players, including Volkov's consortium. We exist precisely because the conventional system fails too many brilliant minds. Nina nodded, having expected this response. Speaking of brilliant minds, Darius wanted me to remind you about dinner tonight. Apparently his daughter has some big announcement. Preston smiled at the mention of Lydia Fleming, Darius's 25-year-old daughter who had grown up alongside the foundation. Wouldn't miss it. My goddaughter's announcements are never small. After Nina left, Preston turned to the large windows overlooking the campus. The foundation had become his family in many ways, filling the void left by his failed marriage and the children he had never had with Juliana. He had dated occasionally over the years, including a 2-year relationship with an environmental scientist that had ended amicably when their career priorities diverged, but had never remarried. The foundation and its mission had become his primary focus, a purpose that continued to energize him even after 15 years. The restaurant Darius had chosen for dinner was understated but excellent, a local establishment the foundation had helped save during the economic downturn of 2031 through an emergency small business innovation fund. The owner greeted Preston warmly, leading him to a private room where Darius waited with his wife Marianne and their daughter Lydia. "Uncle Preston," Lydia exclaimed, embracing him enthusiastically. Though not his biological niece, she had adopted the title early in her childhood, and it had stuck. Brilliant and driven like her father, Lydia had forged her own path, deliberately avoiding direct involvement with the foundation to prove herself independently. "So what's this big announcement?" Preston asked after they'd ordered. "Last time you gathered us like this, you were heading to Tanzania for that renewable energy project." Lydia exchanged glances with her parents, who nodded encouragingly. "I've been offered the position of Technology Development Director at the UN Climate Adaptation Agency." "That's wonderful news," Preston exclaimed sincerely. "They'd be lucky to have you." "Here's the thing," Lydia continued, leaning forward intently. "The position involves implementing large-scale energy solutions in climate-vulnerable regions. And I've been thinking the Novak storage technology would be perfect for these applications." Preston raised an eyebrow. "Our technology is already licensed for humanitarian applications. The consortium has implementation programs in 43 countries." "Yes, but the consortium's approach is top-down and profit-centered, even with the preferential terms you negotiated," Lydia countered. "I'm talking about ground-up implementation, putting control directly in the hands of local communities." Darius watched their exchange with poorly concealed pride. "Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Reminds me of a certain foundation's approach." Preston saw where this was heading. "You want foundation support for a new implementation model." "More than support," Lydia confirmed. "I want collaboration. The UN provides the international framework, the foundation provides the technology and innovation approach, and local communities provide the leadership and adaptation." As Lydia outlined her vision in greater detail, Preston was struck by how perfectly it aligned with the Foundation's core mission while pushing into new territory. It was exactly the kind of bold thinking the Foundation had been established to support. "You realize you're asking for a massive commitment," Preston noted. "This would be the Foundation's largest direct implementation project ever." "I know," Lydia acknowledged. "But think about the impact. Energy independence for the regions most affected by climate instability. Technology transfer that empowers rather than creates dependency. A model that could change how humanitarian technology deployment works globally." Preston couldn't help but smile. 15 years ago, he had launched the foundation with a focus on supporting overlooked innovators. Now those innovators and their children were envisioning applications that went far beyond his original conception. "Write up a formal proposal," he decided. "I'll take it to the board personally." Lydia beamed. "I already have a draft." "I knew you'd say that." After dinner, Preston and Darius stepped outside, while Marianne and Lydia discussed details of the upcoming proposal. "She's remarkable," Preston said. "You and Marianne should be proud." "We are," Darius confirmed, leaning slightly on his cane. "Though sometimes I wonder where she gets her idealism." Preston raised an eyebrow. "From her godfather, perhaps?" Darius laughed. "Maybe, though I seem to recall that particular godfather started with revenge, not idealism." "People change," Preston replied, his thoughts drifting to the journey that had brought him here. 15 years is a long time. "Speaking of changes," Darius said, his tone becoming more serious, "have you thought more about Nina's suggestion? About documenting the Foundation's true origin story?" Preston had indeed been considering it. For years, he had maintained privacy around the personal betrayal and corporate espionage that had catalyzed the Foundation's creation. The official history mentioned his patent and his desire to support other innovators, but omitted the dramatic revenge plot against Westmoreland and Juliana. "I'm still not sure," Preston admitted. On one hand, the full story might help others who face similar betrayals. On the other hand, it keeps the focus on what the Foundation became, not how it started. Darius finished the thought. Preston nodded. Exactly. Besides, Florence always said the most interesting operations remain classified. Darius smiled at the mention of Mrs. Whitaker. She would have loved seeing Lydia take on the UN. Can you imagine the intelligence she would have gathered on the international agencies? Complete dossiers within a week, Preston agreed with a chuckle. They fell into companionable silence, watching the evening traffic pass. So much had changed in 15 years. Yet the core of what they had built remained steadfast, a commitment to innovation that served humanity, not just profits. 2 weeks later, Preston sat in his home office reviewing Lydia's completed proposal for the UN partnership. The ambitious plan would commit significant Foundation resources, but could potentially transform energy access for hundreds of millions of people. His security system chimed, announcing an unexpected visitor. The camera showed an unfamiliar woman in her early 30s standing at his door. Cautious as always, habits instilled by Florence Whitaker died hard. Preston activated the intercom. "Yes? Can I help you?" The woman looked directly at the camera. "Mr. Novak? My name is Emma Westmoreland. I believe you knew my father." Preston felt a jolt of surprise. Bradley Westmoreland had a daughter? This was never mentioned in any of their intelligence on him during the events 15 years ago. Cautiously, Preston went to the door but didn't immediately open it. "What can I do for you, Ms. Westmoreland?" "I'm not here to cause trouble," she said, her voice steady. "I'm a research scientist at MIT. I've been working on energy storage optimization, and my research keeps leading back to your original patents. I'd like to discuss a technical matter with you, if you're willing." Preston studied her through the security feed. She had Westmoreland's jawline, but none of his arrogance in her bearing. After a moment's consideration, he opened the door. "Come in, Ms. Westmoreland. Though I have to admit, I'm surprised by your visit." Emma stepped inside, glancing around Preston's modestly appointed home with obvious curiosity. "I'm not surprised. My father never mentioned me publicly. I was raised by my mother in Europe after their divorce when I was 5. We weren't close." Preston gestured for her to sit in the living room. "And now you're researching energy storage? Ironic, isn't it?" Emma replied with a small, self-deprecating smile. "I had no idea about the history between you and my father when I began my research. It was only when I applied for a grant from your foundation that I learned the connection." "Your grant application was rejected?" Preston guessed. Emma nodded. "Automatically flagged due to my last name. I don't blame your foundation for that. But I still believe in my research, and I thought, perhaps if I spoke to you directly." Preston sat back, intrigued despite himself. "What exactly is your research focus?" For the next 30 minutes, Emma outlined her work on molecular-level stability and ultra-high-density energy storage, work that built upon but significantly extended Preston's original breakthrough. Her technical knowledge was impressive, her passion evident, and her approach innovative. "Why come to me directly?" Preston asked when she had finished. "There are other funding sources." Emma met his gaze directly. "Because your foundation isn't just about funding. It's about mentorship, ecosystem support, and ethical application. And because—" She hesitated. "I wanted to meet the man who ended my father's career. To understand. And now that you're here, now I see that the narrative I grew up with was, unsurprisingly, one-sided." Emma's expression turned reflective. "My father portrayed himself as the victim of corporate sabotage. But I've done my research, Mr. Novak. The real story was quite different." Preston studied her carefully. "Your father made choices. So did I. The consequences of those choices have shaped both our lives, it seems." Emma nodded. "That's why I'm here, in a way. To make my own choices, independent of my father's shadow." She reached into her bag and withdrew a thumb drive. This contains my complete research, including several approaches I didn't include in my original grant application. I'd like you to review it personally. If you still find it lacking, I'll accept that judgment. Preston accepted the drive, intrigued by this unexpected development. I'll review it fairly, Ms. Westmoreland. You have my word on that. As Emma prepared to leave, she paused at the door. Mr. Novak, did you ever regret what happened with my father? Not the professional consequences. He earned those, but the personal destruction. Preston considered the question carefully. It was something he had reflected on many times over the years. I regret that your father chose the path he did, he answered finally. I regret that his actions hurt others, including, it seems, his family. But I don't regret standing up to someone who built a career taking credit for other people's work and destroying lives in the process. Emma nodded slowly. Thank you for your honesty, and for seeing me as more than just Bradley Westmoreland's daughter. After she left, Preston held the thumb drive, struck by the strange symmetry of the moment. 15 years ago, a storage device had contained the key to his revenge against Westmoreland. Now, another storage device might offer redemption of sorts, not for Westmoreland himself, but for the next generation. He plugged the drive into a secure system and began reviewing Emma's research. Within an hour, he was convinced. Her work was brilliant, potentially transformative, and embodied exactly the kind of innovation the Foundation had been established to support. Preston reached for his phone and called Nina. Remember how Florence always said life had a wicked sense of humor? He said when she answered. I think we need to schedule an emergency grant review committee meeting. As he explained the situation, Preston felt an unexpected sense of completion. The circle that had begun with betrayal and revenge 15 years ago was closing in a way he could never have anticipated, with an opportunity to support the brilliant daughter of his former enemy, advancing the very technology that had started it all. That night, Preston stood at his living room window, looking out at the city lights. The Novak Innovation Foundation had changed countless lives over 15 years, but perhaps none more profoundly than his own. What had begun as a vehicle for his revenge had become his legacy, his family, his purpose. Florence, you crafty old spy, he said softly to the night air, imagining Mrs. Whitaker's knowing smile. You were right, as usual. The best revenge wasn't destroying my enemies. It was creating something they could never destroy. Tomorrow, he would approve Emma Westmoreland's grant, support Lydia Fleming's UN partnership, and continue the work that had grown far beyond its origins in pain and betrayal. The past would always be there, but it was the future, with all its unexpected connections and symmetries, that continued to drive him forward. The patent that had changed everything was now just one piece in a much larger story. And that story, Preston realized with satisfaction, was still being written. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.